I am not a historian, but neither are you. So, how about we the people learn this stuff together? Welcome to U.S. 101. Oh God, sorry. I'm just getting over getting sick. I don't get sick days, people. So with only a week and some change to go until Trump's inauguration day, most news outlets are not focusing a lot of their attention on that. Instead, a lot of that news coverage is focused on Russia, specifically Russians hacking the DNC, potentially tampering with the presidential election, and a lot of Trump's tweets that seem to be praising and allegedly defending Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, you've probably seen some of these Trump tweets, or treats, as no one has ever called them. Like these, for example. Great move on delay by Vladimir Putin. I always knew he was smart. Or, Putin said today about Hillary and Dems, one must be able to lose with dignity. So true. But then Trump has also tweeted when Putin was talking about Russia strengthening its nuclear forces, the United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Which was then followed by the sound of millions of Americans collectively shitting their pants. But this odd, weird relationship that Trump has with Putin isn't really all that new in American history. In fact, from the end of World War II up until the early 90s, the United States had a weird, odd kind of relationship with the U.S.S.R. It was called the Cold War. Now, to deep dive into the topic that is the Cold War would probably take multiple episodes of US 101, as well as greater minds than mine, to explain it to you. So, allow me to break it down to you in the simplest terms that I can. The Cold War was essentially a swinging contest. At the end of World War II, when the Nazis were defeated and we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, the 2 greatest superpowers on the planet were the United States and the U.S.S.R. Now, while the U.S. and the U.S.S.R. were allies during World War II, our government was becoming more and more wary of the burgeoning communist regime that was gaining strength in the U.S.S.R., not to mention Joseph Stalin's way of oppressing his people. Plus, after the war, the Soviets started expanding their territory more and more into Eastern Europe, and that kind of started to shrivel up the balls of the United States government a little bit because they thought that the Soviets were going to be the next superpower to try to take over the world. So we started stockpiling our weapons, man. We increased our defense spending, we started developing more atomic bombs, but the Russians, who were keeping a close eye on us, decided that maybe they should start doing the same thing because, you know, in case one day our itchy trigger finger, we decided to scratch it in their direction, they needed to be ready. And this kicked off an arms race between the United States and the U.S.S.R., which would eventually lead to Russia testing out their very own atomic bomb in 1949, thus marking one of the very first times that Russia decided to pull out its and lay it right on the table in front of the United States. So what did our diminutive President Harry S. Truman do? He upped the ante. He said, atomic bomb is old news, son. We're developing the hydrogen bomb, or what he called the super bomb. And once we finally developed the H-bomb, we tested it out in the Marshall Islands at Bikini Atoll. And the blast was so large, it created a 25-mile wide fireball, completely vaporized an island, blew a hole in the ocean floor, and allegedly led to the creation of Godzilla. So the US just didn't respond by taking out its own and putting it on the table. Oh no, it pulled it out of its pants, grabbed it by 2 hands, and started twirling it around in a helicopter motion. Now, it certainly didn't help that by testing these bombs time and time again, these 2 countries would be spewing radioactive particles and waste into the atmosphere, but that did not matter because there were that needed to be swinging, and Russia would swing next by taking this dog and pony show right into space. In 1957, Russia launched the satellite known as Sputnik, which marked the very first time that a man-made object would orbit the planet. So the United States started huffing and puffing. It was like, stupid Soviets launching satellites. We'll launch our own satellite into space. And it did in 1958, called Explorer 1. And then President Eisenhower took it one step further and was like, yeah, I'm also going to create the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. Yeah, you ain't got a NASA, we got a NASA. Soviets ain't got a NASA. We're feeling pretty good about ourselves, yeah. Until April of 1961, when the Soviets launched the first man into space. So in May of 1961, the United States launched its own man into space, Alan Shepard. But then President Kennedy made the very bold claim that before the end of the decade, American astronauts would land on the moon. And it happened. In 1969, with the Apollo 11 mission, we sent astronauts into space, landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong made his famous claim, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. AKA, I'm swinging my on the moon, Soviets! The Cold War finally started coming to a close when Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev, aka the guy with the really huge birthmark on his head, when he introduced the ideas of glasnost and perestroika, or political openness and economic reform, respectively, to the rest of the world. Not to mention, at this time, the U.S.S.R. was starting to break up. It was no longer the major powerhouse that it was back in the day. Plus, there was that time that President Ronald Reagan challenged Mikhail Gorbachev to
tear down this wall,
which happened in November of 1989. Now, there's obviously much more to the Cold War than what I told you, but at least now you know that our relationship with Russia, formerly the U.S.S.R., has always been weird, has always been odd, has always been tense. Now, how Trump will act towards Putin once he actually becomes president on January 20th is something that a lot of people are going to keep their eyes on, because the very fate of the world could depend on that relationship. And that is it for this episode of US 101. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for hanging out and checking out the episode. Really do appreciate it. And again, guys, please go ahead and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/USA History 101. All the previous episodes of US 101 are there, and I'm going to start updating it more regularly with more American historical tidbits and facts and odds and ends that you might enjoy. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Like and share these videos, guys. I really enjoy making them for you. I really hope you enjoy watching them and hopefully learning something new about United States history. On that note, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Until then, we are all done. Take care. Spasiba. Thank you. I'm going that way. Goodbye. Farewell. La, la, la.